Hello and welcome back to Rule the Game. In this video I'm going to show you how to play Fairy Ring, a game by Laurence Grenier and Fabien Tanguy. It's a game for 2 to 4 players, lasts about 40 minutes, and it's recommended starting at age 8. I have the German version of the game, but other than the name of the cards, there's nothing here in German, so you can also play this or you can also listen to this explanation of the game without knowing any German. I will not explain the advanced version of the game. There's some extra cards that you can use for that, but you'll find the instructions for that in the instruction manual. And besides that, we're going to go as usual, first through the game objectives, then how to play the game, then I'll give you some hints for the first game, and I'll show you how to set up the game. But now let's get started with Fairy Ring.
Rule the game.
In Fairy Ring, you're going to set up a village of mushrooms, and then you're going to move your fairy through these different mushrooms to gain points while doing so. You see here a setup for 3 players, and every player has their player board and a disc, and on this disc they're going to have victory points. Now the discs are usually face down during the game because nobody's supposed to see how many victory points you have, but you personally record your victory points on here, and you get victory points by collecting mana, and the mana are these tokens here, and every time you have 20 of these tokens, you'll discard them, put them back in the supply, and then you can increase here the number by 1. To collect the mana, you're going to be moving fairies, and the fairies always move in this fairy ring that you will build here with these different mushrooms that you've placed, and whenever a fairy moves and ends up on a mushroom, then the person whose mushroom they ended on will gain the victory points that it says on the bottom here. I'll show you later what this exactly means. This will be shown in the how to play section. But it's not just the player whose mushroom you ended up on, but also the player who moved the fairy. And in this case it's the white player who moved this fairy, and they also have the same mushroom, and only if you have the same mushroom then you can gain also points from your mushroom over here. And again, I will show you later how this works here, but it's always the player where the fairy ended and the player who has played the fairy. Unless, of course, if the fairy ends up on my own mushroom, then only I win the victory points. I only win those once. At the end of the game, all players will turn around their discs here, they'll compare the victory points. Whoever has the most points, of course, wins. And in case there's a tie in victory points, then the person with the most mana wins. Now if this all sounds a little too abstract to you, then let's go into the next section where I show you how to play this. Fairy Ring is a turn-based game. On each turn, players can do exactly 2 actions. They will place a mushroom in their village, and secondly, they'll move their fairy. The starting player in each round is the person who has this wooden board here on their player board. Now this player then picks up the card that they've previously placed here, and I'll tell you later how you place cards here. They'll take that card and place it in their village. Their village is everything here above their player board, and you see this player already has 2 mushrooms in this village. You see that the mushroom that they've chosen is a different mushroom than they already have here. So in this case, the mushroom will be placed on the left or on the right of the existing mushrooms. You cannot place them in the middle. In case the player had decided to place a mushroom that they already have, like this one here, they could then decide to create a new mushroom, putting it back again on the side of the existing mushrooms, or they can build up an existing mushroom by placing a card here above this little dotted line. You can build up mushrooms up to 4 cards. At that point, you're then going to have to start a new mushroom. Once you've placed your mushroom, you'll then move your fairy. In this case, it's this player here, so this is their fairy. That fairy will get moved by however many points it says here on the cards that they just placed. In this case, it's a 5, so we will move this fairy by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once the fairy has landed, we will then hand out mana points, as many as the card says on which they landed. In this case, they landed on the academy. in the academy, you get 1 victory point per step that he just did. And they did 5 steps, so they'll take a 5. Now, let's assume this had actually said 3. In this case, the fairy would have moved 1, 2, 3, always clockwise, always in this ring, and it would have ended up on an academy by this player here. Now, in this case, if you landed on this mushroom, of course the person whose mushroom it is will get points. This player will now get 3 mana points that they will take themselves here. However, because it was my fairy, if and only if I also have a mushroom in my village that is exactly the same as this one over here, so if I also have an academy, and I do, then I also get however many points that my academy will give me. I also have just 1, so I also get just 3 mana points. Now, had I had a second one on top here, then I would have gotten 2 times however many steps I made. So I would have actually gotten 6 mana points over here, while this player still would have gotten just 3 because their mushroom only had 3. And in case I had even a second academy mushroom, I could have decided, do I want to use this one or that one to get me points? And of course I'd take the taller one because that gives me more points. Now let's assume I had here a card with a 4. I would have moved my fairy 1, 2, 3, 4. I would have ended up here in the Magidrome, which would give this person here 8 mana points. But because I don't have any of these Magidromes, I wouldn't have gotten a single point. So 0 for me, 8 for this person. Once I have put down my mushroom and I have moved my fairy, it moves the turn now, clockwise order, to this player, who will then also take their card. They'll place it here on the side, or maybe this side. They will then also, here it says 3, they will move their fairy by 1, 2, 3. They'll get their victory points. In this case, they get 1 victory point per firefly. For the Luminarium, they have 1, 2, 3 fireflies. They have 2 of these cards here for the Luminarium, so they get 2 times 3, they get 6 mana. And that will be their turn. Then it goes over to this player. They will play their card. And once they've moved their fairy and gotten mana points for it, then that's the end of this turn, and we'll start over with a next turn. At any point in time, if you have 20 mana, then you can return to 20 mana to the supply, and you take your disc and you just move it to the next victory point on the disc. You put it back down face down so nobody else sees how many you have. Once that is done, we then move the cards, and you see here an arrow on the just next to the cards here. You see the arrow. So we move the cards and the starting player board in clockwise order. And now every player picks up their cards again. They'll pick one that they want to play. They put it down face down. They put the other one here on the side, or whatever is left to the side. Same for these players here. They'll do that too. And we do the same thing again next turn of everybody, where we start again with this player here who now has the starting player board over here. We do this until there's only 1 card left here on the side. Once this is the case, the first round's done. We take away these remaining cards, and we hand out to every player 7 new cards from the round 2. And again, they'll pick a card, they'll put the other 6 on the side, they then put the mushroom down, they move the fairy, and so on, again until there's only 1 card left in this space, and that will be the end of the game. At that point in time, we then compare the score. Now I've explained to you almost all the different mushrooms, and since there are only 6 of them, I'll also show you the other couple. We also have here the Pollinarium. In the case of the Pollinarium, you get a victory point per mushroom that you have in your village. In case of the Lookout, you get different number of points depending on how many cards you have here. So if you have all 4 cards, you can actually get 24 points. In this case, for the Luminarium, you get 1 victory point per firefly that you have. In this case, we have 2 cards, so we get 2 points per firefly. We have 1, 2, 3 fireflies, so we get 2 times 3, 6 victory points, 6 mana. And the last one that we've missed so far is the Spring. The Spring is kind of different, because in the case of the Spring, you can decide if you want to move 3, 4, or 5, and you don't actually get points when people land on it, or when they land on or when you land with your fairy on somebody else's Spring. Here you only get points if a player moves across it. If they come in your village over here and they move, or you yourself move across it, then you get however many victory points it says here. In round 1, all the springs will have 1 mana point that you get. In round 2, you'll get 2 mana points per time that somebody actually jumps over it. And you get that for your own ferry as well as for the opponent's ferries. And that's already it. Now let me give you some hints for your first game. And here's some hints for the first game. There is of course a tendency that at first you're going to look at these different cards and you think, oh my god, this mushroom is amazing, I want to have this one. For example, some people will always jump for the spring because they think they're going to get so many points when people then jump across the spring. Others will go for the lookout because it just looks amazing to see how you get 24 points when somebody ends up on your lookout. And that's all good and that's all fine. But the key is that after like round 1 or 2, you should rather look at how many steps your ferry's gonna do whenever you place down a card. Because you have to remember that you don't get the mana points just for your mushrooms, but some fairy actually has to land somewhere. So before you put down a card, check out where your fairy is, then check out in your hands that you have, check out how many steps you're gonna have to do with this fairy. So here you see, this is round 2 cards. They're all 5, 6, 7 steps. Where do I want my fairy to end up at the end of this turn? And then if I see that my fairy is going to end up at 7 steps here on the Pollinarium, well, I don't want it at the Pollinarium because I don't have a Pollinarium. I don't want to give somebody else the points. I want to have my points myself. So instead, I will pick something where I know I will get points too, be it now here the Luminarium if I get there from over here, but it could also be in my own part. Then I don't even have to share the points. And there, if I say, if I end up, for example, here on my Luminarium and I can play this one also, then I add up to it. Yeah, then it's an interesting thing. But that's the key. You want to see where is your fairy ending up, because you want to get points from your fairy wherever it ends. Now there's some risk in this, because if you're not the person who starts a round, and if your fairy is just about to jump into the field where the starting player is, there's the risk that the starting player might actually play a card over here. And if they do so, my fairy might actually not go as far as I thought. So you have to consider that too. It might influence the game, it might influence how you play it. But my recommendation really is, first check where do you want your fairy to go, and then place your mushroom, or choose among the mushrooms that actually fit to this number that you want to have. Of course, if you have a specific one that you really need to build up and they don't show up very often, if you really want to have your fourth lookout, then play your lookout. But you see that your fairy, actually in this case, if it stands right here, it will get right here. But typically, it won't really work out so well as it does right here. Besides that, this is also a really well balanced game. So you can use any mushroom. Any mushroom will give you good points. And that's why I'm saying again, check out where your fairy lands, because that's almost more decisive. Yes, it is very important that you build taller mushrooms than just one level. You want to have more, because then you get more points. You can get 1 victory points, almost 20 mana points in one turn if you get lucky. But you need to build this up properly, and you really, really need to make sure that you end up in the right spot. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel. And up next, how to set up this game. Now let me show you how to set up the game. First, every player gets their player board. We then hand everybody their victory point tracker. They're all going to be set to 0, face down, on the side. We'll put the mana on the side so that everybody can reach them. We'll then shuffle the cards that have a 0. We'll hand every player one of these cards and place it here in the middle of their village. Then we'll take the decks with the 1s and the 2s. If you play just a 2-player game, take only the cards that have a 2 on the bottom. If you play a 3-player game, take the 2-player cards and the 3-player cards here. And if you play a 4-player game, you can take all cards. You'll shuffle them, the 2 decks separately. You'll then put the deck 2 aside. You hand every player here 7 cards. You'll decide who the starting player is. That player will get this little thing here. You'll then also place the fairies, the corresponding fairies to the color of the player here on the different starting mushrooms, and you're already set to go.